Hi, I'm Kevin Johnson, CEO of Starbucks, and we are proud to be a sponsor of Noble's 44th Annual Training Conference. And on behalf of all of us at Starbucks, I'd like to thank Noble for your ongoing partnership, especially during this trying time in our communities. It is more important than ever to find ways to work together and find solutions that move our communities forward. And over the years, together we have hosted conversations in our communities across the country where law enforcement officials and the community can meet and discuss public safety interests, as well as share experiences to foster greater understanding and empathy. We've had more than 1,500 of these conversations that are critical in creating understanding and healing divides. We wish you all success in your meeting over the next few days, and we remain committed to working together. We know all too well how much our store partners depend on you and your colleagues to keep our communities safe, and we thank you. We thank you for your service to our communities.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I am Wendy McSweeney, Executive Vice President and Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer for SunTrust Now Truist. I am so excited to have this timely and long-needed discussion on diversity, equity, and ethical excellence in law enforcement. At Truist, we continue to invest in organizations like Noble to closely partner and share in being an active part of the communities we want to live, work, and thrive in. Our purpose is to inspire and build better lives and communities, and as a part of our mission, we believe we must provide distinctive, secure, and successful client experiences through touch and technology, create an inclusive and energizing environment that empowers our teammates to learn, grow, and have meaningful careers, and optimize long-term value for stakeholders through safe, sound, and ethical practices. I am so excited to be here with you this afternoon, and I look forward to sharing with you about the topic of building diversity, inclusion, and ethical excellence in public safety. Law enforcement executives and other leaders must recognize and understand the importance of building diversity in their organizations to advance fairness and social justice in all networks. Historically, African Americans, women, and other racially and ethnically diverse groups were excluded from public safety positions, and they faced many obstacles in the selection process for jobs, assignments, training, and most importantly, promotions. Today, for this amazing panel, I am pleased to introduce to you retired U.S. Army Lieutenant General Russell Honore, Deputy Director of the U.S. Secret Service, Leon Newsom, founder of Noble's CEO Mentoring Program, Dr. Patrick Oliver, and U.S. Air Force Colonel Tamara Henderson. Each will now give 2 minutes or less opening statements.
Well, hello. It's great to be back with Noble. I've had the opportunity over the last few years to join you in Atlanta, and I think up in Indianapolis. It's great to be here with you. And thanks to Starbucks for supporting Noble. And my hat's off to all the members of Noble. You happen to be policing at a very trying time, and you're holding the line, taking care of our people and taking care of one another. The big thing, I'd just like to make a couple points on diversity and the significance of that across racial, ethnics, as well as gender lines, that our police department needs to look like the community. It needs to look like the community. And when it doesn't, we've got multiple examples in recent history at a place like Ferguson, where the police department did not reflect the population in the community. That being said, we must hold in our community, if we're going to get that diversity we need, that the profession of being a police is an honorable profession. And that in our homes, in the military, we talk about who are the influencers. And we need to watch as adults on what we say in front of children about police. And for sometimes, some people have some good reason to complain about the police. But it's an honorable profession. But if our children don't believe it's honorable possession, they won't join. And so we need to look at the influences. We've worked that hard in the military, and it pays off. And the military is not perfect, but we're one of the best institutions we have in the government in amplifying and being aware and constantly keeping our ear to the ground to ensure our diversity reflects the American people. So I'm glad to be here with you. I look forward to a discussion because I think we have strength through diversity. Thank you.
Thank you, General Honore. Leon, you're up.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Wendy, for agreeing to moderate this panel. I want to begin by acknowledging the distinguished members of the panel and the leadership of Noble, especially my friend and former Secret Service colleague, the incoming President, Linda Williams. I'm humbled by the opportunity to share my thoughts and perspectives on the important topics of diversity, inclusion, and leadership, particularly in this climate of social injustice and protests following the recent and tragic events. As devastating and heartbreaking these past 3 months have been, we realize that these events have sparked a clarion call for action. That's why, as law enforcement executives and leaders, we must take advantage of every opportunity to use our collective energies to inspire positive organizational and community change. It is no longer business as usual in our profession. I can tell you that for the service, the protests in Washington, D.C. had a tremendous impact on our organization. Many of our personnel were on the front lines during the height of the protests, and they took both a physical and mental toll. Shortly after those protests, we hosted a town hall conversation with the entire workforce to discuss civil unrest and law enforcement. As leaders, we could not afford to be silent and allow a wave of uncertainty across our ranks. As leaders, we have to recognize when the window of opportunity opens and be proactive enough to seize the moment. We realized that we too, as leaders, had to be willing to have uncomfortable conversations. We as leaders also had to take an honest look at ourselves to see where we may be bringing our own biases to the table. I can't begin to stress how important it is to respect our differences. We cannot afford to let our unconscious biases prompt us to make the false assumptions about anyone. We recognize that diversity and inclusion are the keys to unlocking the potential for excellence. And we also understand that our greatest strength is our people. And the most effective way we can support our people is by promoting a culture of inclusion. As an executive, I'm thankful every day for the various support services that we have at our disposal. Programs like employee assistance and peer support and chaplain programs. But these folks can't be everywhere. We have to give our leaders the foundation and the tools to have the difficult conversations with those in the workforce that they manage and support. We in the Secret Service believe that courage, duty, honesty, justice, and loyalty provides that foundation, the basis upon which all employees carry out their daily duties, and ultimately the ethical foundation upon which leaders lead. With these 5 points of the service star to build upon, there is no compassion. Without those 5 points, there is no compassion. There is no empathy. There is no real desire for change, diversity, or inclusion. There is no climate or culture to want to see each other or respect our differences while seeking to better understand each other. Ultimately, the dissonance created by not having a healthy workforce that respects and embraces our differences will lead to failure. We have to trust and rely on each other, and that just isn't possible on a continuing basis if we can't see, respect, and embrace our differences. Our collective investment in the principles of inclusion and diversity sustains a healthy workforce, but it also positively impacts how we live with one another in our own communities. I thank you again for this opportunity, and I look forward to our panel discussion.
Thank you. Dr. Oliver.
Okay, thank you, Wendy. I appreciate you hosting, and thank you, Starbucks, for sponsoring this workshop. I apologize to everyone that you cannot see me on the camera. Somehow, just before we were ready to go, I can't get the camera to come on, so I do have a camera, but it's not functioning. So I just want to explain that to you. One of the things I like to say quite often is when the right people and the right job get together, the possibilities are endless. Most law enforcement officer interactions with members of the community go well. However, the minority of times they do not. It typically comes back to either negligent hiring or negligent retention. And that means that law enforcement agency shouldn't have hired the person in the first place, or after that person was hired, problems were manifested that weren't properly dealt with by that law enforcement agency. That being said, I like to say that law enforcement agencies hire their problem people. And I believe that police agency transformation begins with hiring quality officers. If you think about the best organizations in America and around the world, they have the best people. And that's because the quality of the organization is reduced to the quality of the people. Uh, the hiring of a law enforcement officer is the single most important function of any law enforcement agency. And then after that, it comes down to who is assigned where and who is promoted. It is the personnel decisions that are the most important decisions a law enforcement agency makes. No amount of organization or equipment or even training can replace the human relation skills of an individual officer or manager. I would like to echo what's been said earlier, that the cultural diversity of a law enforcement agency should be reflective of its service population. I believe that there is strength in organizational diversity. It improves decision making and improves performance. One of our greatest strengths is, of course, our differences. Excuse me. So every law enforcement agency really needs to focus on really recruiting, selecting, and retaining quality people. And I believe that's an important task for the law enforcement agency chief executive officer. The hiring of people is the most important task of the chief executive officer. Whoever controls the effectiveness of the agency is going to do it through effective hiring. I believe that if a CEO is too busy to become involved in the hiring process, they are just too busy. And that is because it's the people who obtain the results and accomplish the mission of any agency. Uh, People are our most important resource. This fact is usually acknowledged by everyone. It's not denied by anyone. It's written by many, but is oftentimes practiced by very few. So those are my opening remarks.
Thank you, Dr. Oliver. And last but certainly not least, Colonel Henderson.
Hi, thank you, Wendy. First of all, I want to thank Noble and Mr. Crawford and the training team for exercising true diversity and inclusion by including me in this otherwise esteemed panel. So thank you so much for that. As the only federal investigative agency with both a law enforcement and counterintelligence mission carried out by both a military and civilian force of about 3,000 people, it's critical to OSI's mission that we create and maintain an environment that is diverse, inclusive, and culturally competent. So let me back up a little bit because, and forgive me to the audience, if I use acronyms, please call me on it during the Q&A session. But we are the Office of Special Investigation. We're the law enforcement and counterintelligence branch that for the Air Force and now Space Force. But although the military has historically led on many social issues, to include integration and inclusion, we are by no means immune to bias and prejudice, often under the veil of tradition and status quo. Like police agencies throughout the country and across the services, we are conducting review of policies and practices aimed at improving our own diversity and inclusion efforts. Throughout my time in the Air Force, perhaps similar to other organizations, we didn't talk about race within our teams, which was often translated to mean or seen as evidence that race doesn't matter and wasn't a concern. We've changed that paradigm, and what we have learned through the current discussions that this silence prevented us from continuous improvement and engaging in thoughtful ways that allow for constructive engagement on issues that are there, whether we're speaking about them or not. In the Air Force, we talk a lot about our history and the need for innovation in the form of creative approaches and new ideas, and innovation being a key to our Air Force and our country's future success. Prejudice and bias today at its core is about sticking with the status quo, the inability to think differently, the inability to open yourself up to new ideas and ways of thinking, the actual opposite of everything needed for innovation. The size of our Air Force and our armed services needs to be right-sized as it's limited by Congress. Therefore, we cannot afford to underutilize the talents of any airman or soldier or sailor. In addition to a force that mirrors the society we defend, we must also have an environment where we can feel comfortable to speak up with ideas and views that will be different and know that they'll be heard. That's what will bring out the best ideas and, more importantly, the best in each other. Our leaders at every level of our organization must embrace this inclusiveness in their leadership approach and ensure that that permeates to the lowest level as we build future generations of leaders. Foreign agencies such as the Office of Special Investigations that must pursue its core missions globally. Understanding culture, language, and context is imperative to achieving our goals in the most effective and efficient ways. That understanding starts here at home with our own teammates and the American people that we serve. As others have said, our Air Force mirrors society. When we get that right, there is no limit to what we can do together as we learn from each other. Thank you for allowing me to participate in this critical conversation, and I look forward to your questions and the dialogue with the panel.
Awesome. Well, let's jump right in. And Colonel Henderson, if you don't mind that I start with you this time, can you share with us some of your observations and thoughts about the current state of diversity, inclusion? I would like to add in here equity and ethics in police agencies around the country.
So, I can only speak to, the Air Force, and while we're a little different, based on the laws and our reach and interaction with the public, as I've said, we have learned from our discussions that we have a lot of work to do. And it starts with the communication and talking about it. And seeing how, we are not so much different than sometimes people think that we are from each other. So, as I said, I'm encouraged by the dialogue. I think that, there is a lot to do, but I also think with the talent of everyone that we have at our disposal, that we will get there and we will have a better society and a better Air Force for it.
Thank you. Dr. Oliver, what are your observations and thoughts about the current state of diversity, inclusion, equity, and ethics in police today?
I think one of the things that this environment has demonstrated is that most communities lack diversity, and that diversity that they're lacking impacts the quality of the police services that are being provided. It impacts an understanding of the community that's being policed, and it lacks credibility for those in the community when they see that the department is not reflective of themselves. And so hiring is one of the important things that needs to happen in law enforcement today. And really, it's a top 3 issue in law enforcement. Everybody's looking at how to hire and select more quality people. But I think anytime you look at an incident where there is improper use of force or police misconduct, one or two things are present, and I mentioned them in my opening. When you look at the officers that are involved, you will find either that that officers probably shouldn't have been hired in the first place. I do believe that unfortunately law enforcement agencies hire their problems, or it's an issue of negligent retention. People exhibited problems along the way, they were never properly dealt with, and then there became a major incident that sometimes goes viral and really causes a lot of harm, not only to that agency, but the profession itself. And so, my particular emphasis in my area of research is really looking at who do we give this job to? When you think about it, an American peace officer has more authority than anyone in our society. An American peace officer can give a verbal warning, a written warning, issue a citation, which is a summons to appear in court at a later time, can make an arrest, with force if that person refuses to comply, and can use deadly force to protect their life or the life of a community member. From verbal warning to deadly force, that's how much authority an American peace officer has. No one in our society has that much discretion. A mayor does not, a member of Congress does not, a governor does not, a member of the Supreme Court does not, the president does not. And so it's a job of high moral character. And I think we need to be more careful of who gets that job. It's a character-based job, and we need to hire those who have character. I can comment more on that, but I'll just stop at this point.
Thank you. Deputy Director Newsom, when selecting leaders for your organization, what are some qualities and characteristics you're looking for?
Thank you, Wendy, for the question. I mentioned the 5 principles of the Secret Service that we stand on, and we look for courage, duty, honesty, justice, and loyalty. But furthermore, we want leaders to have those tangible skills, being able to lead change and collaborate and partner, build coalition. We are really focused and concerned with how our leaders actually lead people. That they're decisive and accountable, that's important, but more importantly, that they have compassion and that they have empathy. And in my mind, an empathetic leader will embrace the differeres of the folks who work for them. They listen, and they're equitable in how they manage. An empathetic leader is a leader who is engaged with their subordinates and their managers. But as an organization, we can't expect our future leaders to build these skills just by being in a room and by being around it. We have to provide them a structured framework in which they can grow and learn to be leaders, not just supervisors, but to be leaders. And then we need to provide them the continuing education and put them in those positions of increased responsibility and complexity to build upon that foundation. And then lastly, we have to be clear and transparent on the metrics and goals and objectives upon which they will be measured, and then provide the feedback that's necessary at the appropriate times.
Thank you. General Honore, as you were hiring and selecting leaders in your organization, what were some of the key characteristics and strengths you were looking for?
That's a good question. Well, I always try to hire people that were smarter than me, faster than me, and could shoot better than me. Because that's the bench, is how do you look across the organization and look at the talent pool and try to recognize excellence. We are fortunate in the military is that we have a professional development program that basically allow us periodic schooling based on your rank. And as you hit those marks from major to lieutenant colonel, there's a mid-level school you go to. And as you stay on in the service, whether you become a part of the commission corps or you're in the non-commissioned corps, the professional branches, there's a sequence of education that's available to you. And I think that's that organized a process across the uniformed services is a big help, because in each one of those steps we get to evaluation and look at people so they can be with their peers. But looking inside the organization, The other thing you got to do is you got to recognize stupid. People that cannot be trusted, people that have limited skills in what you want them to do. Because I can tell you, at the most trying hour, in the most strenuous situation, if you leave who's in charge to chance, it will be the most inexperienced and the most emotional person that's in your organization. So you cannot leave things to chance. And we work that hard in determining that and try to get people to work as teams. So literally as constant assessment is providing feedback and creating a space for mentorship to make sure that those who want to be executive level can get there. That is very important. There's some of our officers say, look, I want to do my 20, I want to get out. I don't want to be a battalion commander or equivalent of a chief or a major maneuver commander. I want to do my time, I want to get out, and I want to have a second half. And developing those people, and everybody have a opportunity to be the commander if they're willing to work for it and if they're willing to sacrifice for it. And then to coach them to make sure that they save their best leadership for when they get home. We have to invest in our subordinates if we want them to reflect the values, be able to execute the Constitution of the United States and reflect the values of the community and keep the communities and do your job.
Thank you. And panelists, I'm really proud to share that Truist made our most significant contribution to Noble this year in support of growing and developing leaders. And so, Dr. Oliver, I want to talk to you about how do you, as you go through the CEO mentoring program, what are you looking for? What are some of those key characteristics that the program is really seeking when selecting candidates for that program?
Well, there's some rigor to selecting who is qualified for the program. We're looking for someone who is really at a command level. Generally, that's probably captain or higher. Higher is better than captain, but we're looking at somebody who is that level. We're looking for someone who has attended a long police management school. The big three are the FBI National Academy, Northwestern School of Staff and Command, or Southern Police Institute. We're looking for someone who has at least a baccalaureate degree. They're required to have that, preferably a master's, to get in the program. We're looking for someone who's not only been in the field, but also worked specialized area or in administration. It's ideal if they got experience in the field, in administration, and in a specialized area. We're looking for someone who has really 6 particular qualities. These are sort of the soft skills. I mentioned some of the hard skills, but we're looking for someone who has high integrity. Integrity is the most important attribute of a law enforcement officer at the entry level and at the management level. Second, we're looking for someone who is service oriented. You know, they're looking to serve others before self. It's a helping profession. And if you're going to be in management, you're serving those that report to you. And so that's something that's very important to us. Third, we're looking for someone who has really good human relation skills, meeting and dealing with people, that's really able to handle conflict. And so we're looking for somebody who really focuses on dealing with people and is good with people. Fourth, we're looking for somebody who is team compatible. In a law enforcement organization, you operate on the concept of team. You ask people to come in early, to stay late, to be on call, to work evenings, to work nights, to work weekends, to work holidays. The goals of the organization have to be more important than your professional, personal goals. We do want people to have professional and personal goals, but there is a strong team concept that's important. Fifth, we're looking for someone who is performance driven, someone who pursues excellence. The only true success you ever achieve is being the very best that you can be. So I want people that have a history of accomplishment, of getting things done and serving other people. And 6, looking for somebody that has self-control. When things get out of control, they maintain control. So additionally, we're looking for somebody whose goal it is to become a chief executive officer. That's what they aspire to do. Now, when people go through the program, not everyone at the conclusion of that 2-year program with a mentor and education and training decides to become a chief. Most do, but we don't pull any punches. It's not for everyone. We let them know it's the most difficult thing you're going to want to do in your law enforcement career. It is truly lonely at the top. And so those are just sort of some of the things that we're looking for in people that apply for the Noble CEO Mentoring Program.
Thank you, Dr. Oliver. Deputy Director Newsom, how can agencies advance inclusion and diversity to improve public safety and social justice for both officers and citizens?
Well, I think, first, agencies have to make a real commitment to training and diversity and inclusion. As I stated earlier in my remarks, we have a program here in the service, and it's evolved over time to ensure some of those efficiencies, and we've merged some of the programs into one, and we're moving forward. So united under one roof, we now have our EEO and our Ombudsman program, diversity and inclusion program, and those other employee support programs that I mentioned earlier. Secondly, I think we have to appropriately fund and staff these programs. Appropriate resourcing not only allows these programs to flourish and have an impact, but it also demonstrates to your workforce that you're committed to creating a climate of understanding. And again, as a part of this effort, our inclusion and diversity professionals created and tailored a training program a couple years ago. And this program focuses on 10 areas or modules to include, topics such as diversity, unconscious bias, to collective intelligence. And then it's the mandatory 8-hour block of training is ended by asking the question, what's the way forward for the agency? And so we're engaging the workforce and looking for that dialogue and possibly gaining some ownership from the workforce by involving them in the process. For our senior executives, we've mandated that unconscious bias training is done on an annual basis. Just recently, for example, of some of our efforts, we've had facilitated service-wide discussions on social injustice and race relations. We've asked our field offices. We have 161 field offices around the country and across the globe. But we've asked them to go out and into their communities and engage, and to listen and to partner, and look for those opportunities where they can make a difference, and that our folks can also learn. We've looked to re-engage our public and private partners, like for instance here in the National Capital Region, the Holocaust Museum. In the past, we've had as a part of our supervisory training, facilitator-led discussions run by the Holocaust Museum. We're looking to re-engage and recommit ourselves by continuing those discussions and having them in our introductory training courses for our agents and officers. I'll mention one last thing. We've changed how we celebrate our differences. We all have the responsibility of acknowledging the specific federally mandated programs and ethnic observances every year. But for the past 10 years here in the service, we've set aside a time to annually recognize the vast cultures and those diversities represented throughout our workforce. We call it Unity Day, and I'm happy to report that last week we had our first annual Unity Day virtually due to COVID. And because we had to adapt, we were able to reach an audience of folks in our field offices around the country, in the world, who would normally not have had a chance to participate. And we got that feedback, and going forward, we'll look to make sure that we're including that part of the workforce. So it's just acknowledging and knowing that people are out there and that they want to be included, and you make that effort. I think it goes a long way. We believe if our people can see, respect, and understand our differences, and if it starts in the workplace, that those behaviors will carry over, especially for our agents and officers who are out in the streets on a daily basis. That those behaviors will carry over and can be seen in their engagement with the community. And then lastly, I'll say that police agencies and we in the service have fully recognized this, that we have to be accountable. We have to hold our people accountable when they don't perform as they've been trained or according to established agency policies. So we have to be accountable and transparent to our own people, and that we're consistent in how we handle these cases. But we also need to be accountable to the people we serve, and that we consistently enforce our own policies and we avoid that perception that we're making up the rules as we go along.
Thank you for that. Colonel Henderson, do you have anything to add? How can agencies advance diversity and inclusion to improve safety and social justice?
So what we are doing in our organization, what we found in previous years while we were working this, while the Air Force had overall diversity and inclusion offices and people working that, OSI as an organization did not have their own. And it was relatively left up to someone as, just kind of a side additional duty. So OSI got funding and hired a diversity and inclusion officer to head up that role and to ensure that the processes and the policy reviews were actually taking place, and that there was a level of accountability behind any of the processes that were and strategies that were formulated. Another thing that we do is we have a leadership challenge. It's called a leadership challenge form, where every leader before they go into a position, whether it be as an agent or as a support personnel, they take that, and it's a 2-week, I believe, a 2-week course where they learn about their leadership style, communication, strengths and weaknesses, and about being a diverse and inclusive and leading small teams. So we found that that's been valuable. Another thing that we do is we have something called Developing Our 300. And that's a new initiative that's just been started. And OSI looks at that as, in military terms, as an operation where on a monthly basis, the teams get together and have conversations, critical and crucial conversations such as this, where you really learn about your team. It's not about getting together, to play sports, while sometimes that might be the objective, but mainly it's about knowing your team and getting to know, your team outside of the work environment, and knowing the challenges that they face. We also do things like participating in NOBLE, the non-federal entities, as far as NOBLE, WIFL, HAPCOA, the other agencies, where we can find the best practices that are happening in the civilian law enforcement agencies and bring those back where applicable to the Air Force agency.
Traditionally, the military, at least for me, working from a diversity and recruiting space, it feels like the military has done a really good job of diversification and the ability to promote diverse talent. General Honore, can you talk to us about some of the things the military does to remove bias in that promotion opportunity?
Yeah, I think it starts with having a pretty good dashboard of if you don't track it, it's not important. And at the executive level in the Army, and I'll use that as the battalion formation, about 700 troop, and a brigade formation, about 3,000, and a division of about 15,000, that their data can tell you a lot what's going on of how long does it take in certain units for women to get promoted compared to men, and then across ethnic lines. Data can show you that the aberrations of why this unit, it takes a woman 3 years to get promoted to private first class, and this unit it takes 2, or in this unit it takes a white male, a year to make private first class. Data can show you a lot of what's going on in that unit. It will also show you, when you look at disciplinary habits, of who's getting punished, and whether those are administrative or whether they go into court martial or end up in dismissal. So I think you as a part of your monthly review, as it is, then to have people that come to you and say there's a spike in something's going on in this unit, and you find out it might be a new first sergeant or a new commander who is not reflective of the values of the organization and what you're trying to do. So don't bypass data. You know, it has it can tell you a lot. It won't tell you everything, but it will tell you a lot. And right now, even today at the national level, when we roll up Army data, people of color and females don't necessarily advance at the same rate, or nor do they get punished at the same rate. As good as we have tried to make this thing, it is important. As far as the advancement of people, I do think we have to, inside of every formation, somebody has to provide that mentoring to those who aspire to want to be an executive, as the professor was saying early on, Dr. Howard, that how do you pick those people out and how do you mentor them to be able to get the advancement as well as get the feedback that they need, and then to have a mentoring program inside the organization.
Thank you. So I want to open this up to anyone who would want to answer. As we think about the challenges of racially and ethnically diverse talent, women, and any other generally excluded group, how do we break those cycles and ensure that they get fair and equitable access to assignments, training, and promotion?
All right, Wendy, I'll start. I think it's by, first and foremost, you have to have more people at the table, and more people having a hand in making those decisions, and more importantly, having a hand in making the policies and the assignment selections and the mentoring capabilities in place as you go along. And then we have to have people that are held accountable for pursuing that, and making sure that it doesn't get pushed to the background, or that there's somebody not doing their job.
Thank you. Deputy Director Newsom?
No, I would agree with the Colonel. We should be making promotional the process as objective as possible, and we've done that here in the service, and that we've moved, to more metrics. We've included some self-assessments, and then you go in the room and there's transparency, and you have a board of people. There's just not one or two people who are making these decisions and moving people along. So as long as that room where those decisions are made are representative of the workforce and representative of society, our idea is that things will be fair and transparent. I like to tell people that the director staff, the current board, is 50% or almost over 50% minority. So for me, I think that's a huge start.
Thank you. General Honorary, we had a question come in from the audience, and they want us to go back and address the disparities that you mentioned. What are some of the things that leaders can do to address those disparities? How do we, in the midst of, still having disparate treatment around promotions and who gets disciplined, what are some things the group can do to address those disparities?
I think it's, since we are imperfect as people, by and large, that we have to have those sensing spots to tell us something is aberrant in that unit. And because generally it's not the entire organization, it's parts of the organization. And you look for how the department presents itself. Anytime I see or go to a unit and I see the flag detail, and they'll come out with 5 or 6 people carrying the flag, and there are a couple guards carrying guns, the ceremonial. If I look at that and it's all people who look alike, I get very suspicious, because I've been to units where the entire color guard, not many, but everybody was a minority. And say, well, what's going on here? Is this reflective of the unit? So I think units and organizations will talk to you if you have a sense of equity, a sense of diversity, a sense that at the executive level, that the organization must reflect the community that it serves. And that certainly is true in the formations that I commanded, that it's obvious in some cases that something that people are not being treated fairly. And then it requires time to go in there and figure out what's going on, or to move some people that may be treating people unfairly in a very, very, very secretive way. And it's not obvious, but in the data will tell you it's not. So I think we have to be very conscious of what the data tell us, and then what you're seeing. Who's on duty on Saturday? Okay, who's on duty on Sunday? And then if it's not reflective of the organization, then something's going wrong. People are practicing some old techniques that discriminate against people as to, so you're looking for the obvious, and you got to look at the data. Probably Dr. Oliver have a better feel for that from an acquisition side, but that as a practicum, that's what I look for.
So Dr. Oliver, since General Honore tossed it to you, do you have anything to add?
I'm trying to remember what the key question was. I was listening.
When you find disparate treatment where you're seeing women or racially and ethnically diverse individuals getting treated differently, graded harsher, punished more severely, what are some things that organizations can do to break that cycle?
If you're going to have a diverse organization, it has to be leader-led. The chief, the sheriff, the CEO, whoever that person is, like what it sounds like is happening in the Secret Service, has to make it a priority, has to hold people accountable, has to have a plan, has to provide training, look at the metrics, and then gradually move the organization along. It's a long-term project. It's not going to happen overnight, and there must be a commitment to it. And that commitment probably has to be over multiple CEOs, unless that CEO has long tenure. I will tell you, the reason that the Noble Mentoring Program was started is because we realized that African Americans who aspire to the chief executive officer, both men and women, were hitting the glass ceiling in their agency. So we felt we needed to set up a farm system where people could go and get education and training, have a mentor, and develop a career plan so they could get where they're going. We've had now in 12 years, 27 graduates, 17 are chiefs. Of those 17, only 4 became chief within our own agency. The other 13 became chief outside of their agency. And I think what's interesting about those stats is that of the other 10 graduates who aren't chief, they have not pursued the chief's position yet. Most of them have decided that they're not going to pursue it. And what's even more interesting of those 17 chiefs, 15 of the 17 got the job the first time out. So there needs to be an executive development program to prepare people for that position. And those individuals, because they were competitive, were able to go outside and compete for chief's jobs, maybe better for them, and be successful in getting hired.
Thank you for that. I'm going to transit. Okay. I'm
Wendy?
sorry. Go ahead.
Wendy, can I just add, and I also think, as the general said, we have to call this out and we have to make improvements one person at a time. I think as individuals, we have to be willing to, when we see it, we say something about it. You know, as being a minority and sometimes the only person who looks like me at the table, sometimes I find myself, being the disparity or the diversity police, so I can't attack everything because then I just become noise. But if everybody was doing it and saying, hey, you know what, why are the people that look like this doing the Saturday duty every day? Because to be honest with you, I think oftentimes people don't notice it because it looks right to them, because that is what it has looked like forever. So until we're able to say, hey, I'm a little more attuned to this and I'm more sensitive to this or aware of it, you have to call it out, and you have to call it out when you see it on the spot. And what I found is that people are willing to listen, and they're willing to kind of check themselves and say, you know what, hey, you're right. Let's rethink that. Let's have another discussion.
Yeah, great.
No,
Deputy Director Newsom.
Absolutely. And I don't want to repeat what the other panelists have said, but to what Dr. Oliver had said, that I think part of the process is you have to be willing to continually self-assess what you are doing as an executive board, as a leadership team, and as an agency. We can't become complacent in that, you may have achieved something, you may have had a few victories along the way, or you think you're on the right path. I was recently on another call, and one of the speakers had said that it's not enough just to do things right. We also have to question whether right is adequate. And I think if you keep that in your mind and in perspective, that we just can't settle and sit and rest on our laurels. We may have done enough in the past, but that may not set us up for the future. So we just can't miss the opportunities to evolve and address issues, especially when it comes to race and inclusion and engagement.
Awesome. Thank you. And our last question, and then I'll give everyone an opportunity to do some closing remarks. How does your organization partner with the community to address some of the issues? And I think about the SunTrust Now Truist partnership, where we've done sponsored the Law in Your Community and some of the community forums. What are some ways that your agency is bringing the community in to be a part of the solution?
Well, for the service, again, with our offices across the country and the world, we give a lot of our leaders the flexibility to go out and determine how that looks. And that could be a double-edged sword because, one, they may not be doing it to the level that we would expect. But it does allow them that flexibility. They know where they work. They know the communities where they work. And they can go out and engage. And The recent tragic events in Minneapolis has again opened that door to allow them to engage in the communities, whether it's civic groups, whether it's the church groups, whether they're looking to partner with other law enforcement groups and mentoring youth in the community. I think the opportunities are abound. You just have to make the effort and move forward.
Thank you. Colonel Henderson?
I just, as I stated earlier, participation for the military in these non-federal entity agencies, bringing back the best practices and then sharing some of the work that we're doing, so that crosstalk is critical. And, just being in our recruitment, making sure that we are getting out there and we're letting everyone know of opportunities, because sometimes the issue is just we're not aware of the opportunities. So being in the Air Force, we say, everyone's a recruiter. So getting out there, sharing, what you do, the opportunities that I've had, and sharing that and bringing the community to us.
Awesome. Dr. Oliver, do you have anything you want to add? How's you partnering with the community to help bring change?
Well, I think the community has to be involved because it's a community that we're all serving. So I think that every law enforcement agency ideally should have a community partnership, a formal one, a committee, a task force, or a group of some kind in which they get input and feedback, not only on hiring, but also on promotion, and also to help them look for people. Also, they can partner on training. They can provide some management training for law enforcement professionals. So provide some in-kind services. So that community partnership is key. So I think all law enforcement agencies should look for ways to partner with their community on all the things they're doing, particularly when it comes to personnel issues.
Thank you. General Honore, I want to give you an opportunity to share any of your final thoughts on the topic of diversity, equity, inclusion, and ethical practices as we talk about law enforcement.
Oh, thank you. Of course, I come from a little different background in the military, but I would say to that last question, if I may, you don't want to be exchanging business card at the scene of a disaster. In the community that you live in, you need to get to know the people in that community. Now, because wherever I served in my 37 years, whether it was in South Korea with 18,000 troops that on Saturday night thought they would own the town, you've got to get to know that mayor. You get to know the police chief, and the fire department and the church and everybody else. You need a lot of help. But I say that to community engagement at the executive level and the C-suite of whatever organization. Everybody has to be involved in community engagement. Because again, you don't want to have to get to know them only once something bad happened. We've got to reach out and know the people in that community and participate in what they're doing. As far as the equity and the diversity, I think we get what we invest our time in. If we don't invest time in it, your organization probably won't be as diverse as it should be. Equitable, the data shows you. If you look at the command and staff of a unit and you don't see equity inclusion, then it's not there, because there's no reason for it not to be there. Look for the obvious, and then look for the data that involve the main part of the formation, the masses. Or is everybody being treated equitably on paper? And then look at that organization, and when they walk out for a command and staff, or do they reflect the greater formation in the nation that they are protecting, or the community that they're protecting? And it's obvious if you're looking for it.
Awesome. Thank you. And General Honore, I don't know if you remember, but I brought you in at another organization in St. Louis back about 8 years ago. So it's good to see you again.
Good to see you.
Deputy Director Newsom, do you have any final comments on the topic?
No, I want to thank you again, Wendy, for moderating the panel, and then also the panelists and Noble for this meaningful opportunity. I'll just repeat one of the things that I said earlier, and I think it's the most important thing for me, and that we take advantage of this opportunity, and that our collective investment in the principles of inclusion and diversity and engagement, that if we put the time in and the resources and the effort, it'll sustain a healthy workforce. But more importantly, my belief is that our people who come to work every day will take what they learned, and those principles of inclusion and diversity, and what they've learned, and how to embrace differences and different cultures, that they'll take that back to the communities where they live. And I think overall it'll make us a better people and a better country. So thank you again for the opportunity.
So I'll just say in closing, as an OSI agent, with having had an association with Noble my entire career, it's really my honor and privilege that at this point in my career, I'm able to give back. And on behalf of Brigadier General Terry Bullard, the OSI commander, we look forward to our continued participation with Noble, and learning best practices and participating in the community and with policing. So thank you again for having me.
I would say to those individuals listening here to this particular session that want to get promoted, and maybe they're in an environment where there are not a lot of people that look like them, go and find a mentor, someone who looks like you. It can be outside of your agency, and attempt to learn from them. The Noble Mentoring Program is based on the Master Apprentice Method. The Master Apprentice Method is the oldest training method in the world, and maybe still the best. If you want to learn something, learn from a master. I think General Honore would confirm that a lot of people in the military who go up high in rank will all tell you that they had multiple mentors. So find a mentor and develop a career plan of where you want to go, and reduce it to writing of how you're going to get there.
I think Miss Wendy might have a technical problem. Look like her camera froze. Technical, you monitoring, producer? We might have gone to a camera freeze. Producer, you listening?
He says, please continue, General.
Oh, okay. Well, may I, among us with the Secret Service, what do you see a way out of this tension we have now? What would be your advice to officers in the field that are in many communities walking into very tense situations now? Things that are by their fault they did not create. Much of it is addressing legacy issues. How do you advise officers out in the field now that are in leadership position to deal with these issues?
Well, I think, General, just as I mentioned earlier about, having leaders and the most important trait is being empathetic. I think they have to lead in the field with empathy and compassion. I think you can do your job and enforce the laws of this country, but you can also do them with compassion and empathy. And I think if you show that in the way you lead on a daily basis, the people who follow you will see that and perform likewise. So honestly, General, here in DC, we had some folks on the front lines, but out in the communities and the local and state police, I think it's going to require, a sit down, and the people need to talk. And I mentioned it earlier. They need to see each other. They need to hear each other. And they need to listen. And it needs to go both ways. Quite frankly, I think that's the only way out of what we're dealing with right now.
Well, I defer to any other panel member who've got a crosstalk point. Dr. Oliver or Colonel Henderson, is there a point you'd like to pose to anyone else on the panel at this time?
No, thank you, General. I think I thought we were wrapping up earlier, so we lost our moderator. But no, I'm fine. Again, I think this is a critical conversation, and it's one that we are not going to. It's not about a number or a milestone. I think when you're there, and I think we'll through panels like this and the other wonderful thoughts and ideas that I've heard from the other panelists. I think as long as we are exchanging and we're growing and we're a continuous improvement on our own policies and strategies, I think we will get there.
And there's Miss Wendy. She's back.
I'm back. Oh goodness! Did everyone get an opportunity to speak?
Yes.
We did. We did.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you all so much for joining us this afternoon. Thank the entire board, President Davis, Dwayne Crawford, and the entire Noble family for this opportunity. Thank you so much to our distinguished panelists for joining me this afternoon. And with that, I will say SunTrust, now Truist, and Starbucks wants to thank you for allowing us to sponsor this panel.
Thank you. God bless.
Thank you, Wendy.
Good luck, all.
Thank you all.